Hey there, Evan Nathaniel Grimm. Today I'm going to break down the Libra full moon happening April 5th in the evening. So this one is April 5th at 9:34 Pacific time. Now this one is going to be a huge breakthrough for your relationships. Now this can be platonic, romantic, or professional. So it doesn't just have to be a romantic thing. This is any alliance or association or friendship or yes, romantic partnership that you have. And as I walk through the full moon today, you want to track where 16 degrees of Libra is in your chart. So this is where you're going to feel your emotions coming to the surface. This is where you will be dealing with hopefully compromising and coming to a resolution on some of your relationships. However, some of you will be freeing yourself from relationships. So it's a bit of a nuanced and complex full moon. And so I'm going to walk through how you can avoid relationship issues, but also be really honest and transparent with yourself about relationships that are no longer working. And I'll also explain why you're feeling this sort of clash right now in identity, basically, between who you're becoming and who you're currently surrounding yourself with. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can go through this together and you can see a visual of what's happening in the sky. So keep in mind that every full moon is the completion of a lunar cycle in the sense that, or not necessarily a lunar cycle, we still have 2 weeks to go after that, but it is sort of the culmination and the completion of a certain journey that you either started 2 weeks ago on the Aries New Moon or 6 months ago on the Libra New Moon. So you'll probably be closing off a couple chapters simultaneously. So we have these sort of miniature chapters and these larger chapters. So definitely think about where you were, again, 2 weeks ago and even 6 months ago on the last fall. So the Libra full moon here, let's talk about really what are the themes involved. So Aries on the opposite side is dealing with, as a sign, Aries always deals with our relationship to ourselves. It's very independent. Libra, on the other hand, deals with our relationship to other people. And they're really the themes here with Aries to break this down further. Aries is really independence, new beginnings, being headstrong, courage, impulse, and leaping forward. Libra is about trust, cooperation, mediation, moderation, balance, symmetry, peace, and compromise. And with cardinal signs, we're talking about initiation and decisiveness. So with a full moon in a cardinal sign, hopefully you're making a really key decision about how you are aligned or not aligned with somebody, whether or not you want to be in a certain relationship, and whether or not that relationship supports your growth. So to give you some context about why we're feeling maybe a little bit disoriented or out of step with the people in our lives, the Aries new moon was sort of a powerful reset, as I've described before. It was even a global reboot. And many of you are stepping into a fresh identity because of that. So we have, as you can see, Pluto in Aquarius, Saturn now in Pisces, Mars now in Cancer. There's so many changes with the planets right now that you probably no longer feel like you're in the same, timeline, on the same timeline as you were a few months ago. So this can feel very disorienting, and it's bringing you, I think it's bringing you to a good place though. So you want to get comfortable with change and with this sort of dynamism of this time. But you are having to reconcile that now with the existing relationships that you've committed to. So relationships that are out of alignment with your new values probably will fall away around this week. However, I also want you to consider the fact that every relationship comes with it difficulties and hard work. So it's not like by freeing yourself, this could be an illusion, right? Where it's like, oh, if I get rid of this relationship, I don't have to, I don't feel like I have a thorn in my side anymore. This person's no longer agitating me. Well, think about where does this person actually help me push myself further, right? To actually evolve. So this hard work is kind of like resistance training when we're kind of lifting weights. And that resistance training helps us grow and evolve. And these themes are front and center at this time because when the full moon's at peak light, it's like our emotions are unavoidable. We have no choice really but to confront them. And the full moons are times of release. So in that way, this full moon could almost be a trap for some people. And why am I saying that? It's because if you look at it here, the full moon is opposite Chiron and Jupiter at the same time. So when it's opposite Chiron, that's a time to reconcile, insecurities, but also really have to deal with them. So there's probably a person in your life right now who's making you feel like there's that chip on the shoulder, or that you feel inadequate, or that you feel, again, like very vulnerable or insecure. But that's not necessarily a call to run away from it. Now, Jupiter is trying to tell you to do that. Jupiter is encouraging you to emphasize freedom, to emphasize, sort of that adventurousness. So it's like you want to explore, you want to adventure, you want to get away. And that's okay. I'm not saying that everybody here should just stay in their relationship, but there needs to be kind of a decision tree here, which is step number one, think about, okay, every relationship, like just, come to terms with the fact that every relationship that you're ever in is going to involve a little bit of, courage. And that's Aries, right? It takes courage to be in a relationship because it takes courage to ask somebody, how are you feeling right now? How do you feel about me? Because when you ask somebody, how do you feel about me? You are relinquishing control. And Aries and Scorpio, by the way, and other signs, any sign that has a lot of Mars energy, those types of energies don't want to relinquish that control because they would rather say, hey, I'm set on my own. I dictate my own schedule. I dictate my personality. I dictate, what I view as enjoyable and not enjoyable. And I'm not going to test myself at this point. But during this full moon, you actually want to be a little bit more honest with yourself and say, relationships, regardless, are valuable, because it's like if I talk, let's say that I had a sort of a quirk where I would talk sort of about myself too much in conversations. It's like a partner might help you come to terms with that and realize that, oh, the way you talked to my friend just now, it kind of felt like you were making it all about you. That's the benefit of relationships. And you can tell when people have been in relationships and not, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. You can tell when someone has decided to kind of close themselves off versus someone who's very mature and willing to be scrutinized or willing to grow. So on this full moon, this is a perfect time with Chiron involved to think about what insecurities are being brought up and why is this relationship in a rut, or why is it going in circles with the same arguments? Like really come to terms with like what from your past is coming back into the present tense and face that and discuss that and open up about that to your partner. So say, hey, I've been in a relationship before where, this was an issue, or we ended up breaking up because of this thing. So I'm just very sensitive to it. Or, when I was younger, I used to get made fun of for this thing or whatever, and we need to address that. So make sure that you address in this decision tree, make sure you address and at least are open and transparent and clear about what is causing you, what's that thorn in your side, to bring it in the sort of the mythos of Chiron. What's that thorn in your side? And with Jupiter, we're getting perspective on that. And we're opening our minds to different ways to approach that healing process. And so if you do that, then you can approach Jupiter more earnestly and positively. It's like, oh, maybe this planet will help us grow our relationship and help us become more aware of how each of us is kind of picking at each other's vulnerabilities, how each of us could grow. So yeah, allow yourself to be scrutinized. But also that openness will help your partner realize or your friend realize that maybe they need to do a better job of opening up about where they feel kind of insecure about something. So maybe they would all of a sudden say, oh yeah, I've actually dealt with that dynamic in my relationship as well in the past. So now we have more in common than we think. So that's how you want to use this Libra moon. And again, I feel like it's slightly problematic, by the way, that a lot of astrologers tell you that full moons are about endings. I don't ascribe to that, actually. I think that full moons are more about illuminations. Now, for some people, it is an ending of something or a completion of something, but it doesn't have to mean the end of a relationship again. It's literally just that, oh, our habitual day-to-day routines where maybe we are more matter of fact or just funny with, and just humorous and sociable with our partners. Maybe at this time, it's like we want to be, it's almost like we're dealing with things that have been kind of building for a while. So some key questions to ask yourself. Do my relationships align with my new values? So that's a really critical question, though. So even after, so let's say you go through this process, you've addressed why you're feeling weaker or smaller or insecure in a relationship. And you've addressed all these things, but you still feel out of step with this person. It's like, yeah, maybe you have gone through a values realignment in the past couple of months with all these global changes and changes in, the energy. So if you've outgrown somebody, then yeah, Jupiter's here to help you free yourself. So you have to ask that question as well. Do my relationships align with my new values? Now, do my significant connections make me feel strong or weak? It's worth mentioning that. Whose responsibility is it to heal these insecurities? That's a really good question, because you're balanced. I think it's both. I think it is your partner or your friend's responsibility to help you kind of approach it differently, but it's also on you to do the work. So I think it's a balance. So also, do I stand to gain more from facing my insecurities in this relationship, or do I benefit more from dealing with them on my own? So some of you may look for and ask for space at this time, basically. And that's fine too. If you feel like, hey, I don't have time for a relationship because after we had that conversation, I know that I need to deal with my issues on my own, and by all means do that. But also, no relationship is perfect, but is this one making me a better person? So this is not a time for idealism. This is not a time to believe that, the knight in shining armor is coming. And it's also not a time to undersell yourself, of course. But think about, again, how much have I benefited from this relationship? Has this person given me perspectives that I would never come up with on my own? Just like when you're talking to a therapist, they ask you really pointed questions that you might have been able to come up with on your own eventually, but that you just, you haven't been willing to ask. So allow your partner to be this sort of therapist here, or your friend. Allow them to ask you questions that they wouldn't normally ask, or ask them to just prompt them. Like, hey, what do you really think about how I handled that situation? What do you think about the way that I reacted to our other friend? Like, face that part of yourself through this sort of question answer format. Now, if we look at the chart ruler, it's Venus, because Venus rules the full moon here in Libra, and Venus is still conjunct to Uranus. So yes, this can kind of lead us again into this desire for newness and freedom. But it also allows for sudden epiphanies, because Uranus is sudden downloads. So you may get sudden downloads again about, oh, wow, this relationship is actually really healthy for me, as long as I, approach it this way now. So again, this is why these can be relationship breakthroughs. And that's the title that I've given to this video. Now, as a final consideration, we do have Mars in Cancer, and this has probably been causing more disruptions in the home lately. So if you're living with somebody, especially a partner, if you live with your partner, then you're more likely to experience conflict on this full moon. If you're not living with your partner, then maybe it's a little bit more mitigated, this risk. And then finally, if you are in some conflict with your family members, that is possible here. So Mars in Cancer has created, most likely, some turf wars here. Between roommates, again, between partners, between cohabitants and family members. So as I'm going through this video and I'm talking about relationships, I'm sure there's a huge cohort of you who is mostly thinking about this as, oh yeah, that's my sibling you're talking about, or that's my parent you're talking about. So definitely keep in mind that Mars is here. And Mars will square Chiron on the eclipse April 19th. So I'm going to talk about that in a future video. But yeah, you definitely want to be really, really looking for resolution, right, in these relationships so that they don't fester by the eclipse. It's not a square, but, Mars is almost squaring the moon. It's not really, I would need Mars to be closer to like 10 or 11 degrees of Cancer, but I still think that it's possible here that Mars is kind of causing that agitation. So again, as long as you really take this mature approach to the way you handle yourself and the way you handle, keep your composure, basically. The Libra full moon is actually one of the better full moons for keeping the peace and compromising. And ultimately, that's what's going to happen for you. In an ideal scenario, you're going to compromise because Libra is the mediator. So it's kind of like, where do I end and where do you begin and where do we begin and how do we fit into these distinct identities? Because you never want to sacrifice your individuality in a relationship, but you also want to recognize that relationships are alchemical processes, and this alchemization, it's an alchemization of something that is greater than the sum of its parts. If there's like a third entity that's created out of a relationship. So all in all, I think this is a really I think it's a powerful full moon. It's somewhat as powerful as you want to make it. I'm not going to pretend like this is the biggest full moon of the year per se. I don't necessarily feel that, But I think this is a really important category or area of your life that you really want to resolve, because you want to be thinking about who's on the same spiritual quest as me right now. Am I growing with Pluto and Aquarius? Am I finding these new groups? And is my partner, is my friend, is my parents okay with me going in this new direction? So that's really the kernel of truth here about this full moon that I think everybody should go through. And again, if you resolve these relationship dynamics, then you'll be even more set up for success on the eclipses, which are very critical. So again, thank you so much. My name is Evan Nathaniel Grimm. If you want a reading from me, you should get one through the link below. Also, I'm hosting a retreat in Croatia this September. You should also attend that. There's some spots left. And finally, I'm teaching astrology courses, intro, intermediate, and advanced. So if you want to see me deliver insights on astrology, building up the concepts from the ground up, doing it in a webinar format with slides and Q&A from the class. And you get the recordings after, even if you can't attend one of the lectures, by the way. And you get 20% off if you sign up for all three. So really appreciate your time and take care.